He checked his phone more than he checked his own thoughts. Messages, updates, headlines, noise. And still, in the quiet spaces between notifications, something inside him felt untouched. What if the life that looks full is the one that leaves the deepest emptiness? Daniel was 28. On the outside, he was functioning. He replied to messages quickly. He kept his calendar organized. He knew how to sound present in conversations. But inside, his days felt like a series of tabs left open in a browser that never closed. At night, when the room dimmed and the screen went dark, he would lie still and feel a thin, persistent ache behind his ribs. Not pain, not sadness, just the sense that something essential was missing, and he had no name for it. His mornings began the same way. The soft glow of his phone before the sun had fully risen, the faint hum of traffic outside his window, the cold surface of the kitchen counter under his fingertips as he waited for his coffee to brew. He would scroll while sipping, reading things he would forget within minutes. The spoon would clink gently against the ceramic mug, a small, repeating sound that marked time better than any clock. At work, he was efficient. He answered emails, attended meetings, nodded at the right moments. His colleagues liked him. He was easy to be around. He knew how to laugh at jokes that were only mildly funny. He knew how to say, "That makes sense," even when nothing really did. But there was a distance in him, like he was watching his own life through a pane of glass that no one else could see. Evenings were quieter, but not more peaceful. He would sit on the couch, the blue light of his screen washing over his face, the room otherwise dim. Sometimes a show played in the background, but he rarely followed the story. He would check one app, then another, as if somewhere in the endless stream of content, there would be a moment that felt real. There never was. The days blurred together, not in a dramatic way, in a gentle, almost polite way. Nothing terrible happened, nothing remarkable either. It was a life that looked stable from the outside and felt strangely hollow from within. The rupture came on an ordinary afternoon. He had stepped into a small convenience store near his apartment. The air inside was cool, carrying the faint smell of cleaning products and stale chips. He picked up a bottle of water and waited in line. There was only one person ahead of him, an older man, standing slightly hunched, counting coins slowly on the counter. The cashier watched patiently. Daniel shifted his weight, his fingers tapping lightly against the plastic bottle. He could feel the familiar pull to check his phone, to fill the space, to escape the small discomfort of waiting. Then the man turned slightly and looked at him. Not a long look, just enough to notice. "You look busy," the man said quietly. Daniel gave a small, polite smile. "Just a long day." The man nodded, as if that answer was expected. Then he asked, almost gently, "Busy with what?" It was a simple question. Too simple. Daniel opened his mouth to answer. Work, messages, things. But the words felt thin before they even formed. He paused, for a second longer than normal, long enough for the silence to become noticeable. I don't know," he said, surprising himself. The man did not react. He simply gathered his coins, completed his purchase, and walked out. The door chimed softly behind him. The moment passed, but something in Daniel did not. That evening, the question stayed with him. Busy with what? He sat on his couch, phone in hand, but he did not unlock it. The room was unusually quiet. The hum of the refrigerator seemed louder than usual. Outside, a light rain had started, tapping softly against the window. The air felt cooler, carrying the faint smell of wet asphalt drifting in through a small crack. He placed the phone on the table beside him. The surface felt smooth and slightly cold against his palm. He leaned back and stared at the ceiling. The question replayed in his mind, not as an accusation, but as something unfinished. Busy with what? He tried to list his day. Emails, messages, a meeting that led to another meeting, a short conversation he could barely remember. Scrolling. Always scrolling. He could recall the actions, but not the meaning. It was like remembering footsteps without knowing where they led. The rain grew steadier, a soft, continuous sound. He pulled an old blanket over his legs. The fabric was worn, slightly rough, familiar in a way that felt grounding. He had owned it for years, though he could not remember when he last noticed its texture. For the first time in a long while, he did not reach for distraction. He let the silence stay. And in that silence, something uncomfortable surfaced. Not a dramatic realization, not a sudden clarity, just a quiet awareness that his days were full of movement, but empty of attention. He was not choosing what filled his time. He was reacting to it. The pivot came softly. He realized that the problem was not that his life lacked moments. It was that he was never fully inside them. The thought settled slowly, like dust in still air. He watched the rain trace uneven lines down the window. He listened to the rhythm of it, noticing how it changed with the wind. He felt the weight of the blanket, the steady rise and fall of his own breath. These were small things, ordinary things, but they felt present. The next morning, nothing dramatic changed. His alarm went off. The room was still dim. The city still hummed outside. His phone was still within reach. But this time, he did not pick it up immediately. He sat on the edge of his bed for a moment. Just a moment. He noticed the coolness of the floor under his feet. The quiet before the day began. It felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable, but also clear. In the kitchen, he made his coffee without scrolling. He listened to the sound of it pouring into the mug. He watched the steam rise and disappear. The spoon still clinked against the ceramic, but now he heard it fully, as if it were the only sound in the room. Later, when a notification appeared, he did not open it right away. Not as a rule, not as a punishment, just as a choice. A small pause before reaction. To anyone else, nothing had changed. He still went to work, still answered emails, still lived in the same apartment with the same routines. But something subtle had shifted. He was no longer moving through his life entirely on autopilot. There were small pockets of attention now. Small spaces where he was actually there. Days passed, then weeks. The ache did not disappear completely. Some nights, it returned, quiet and familiar. Some days, he slipped back into old patterns without noticing. The pull of constant distraction did not vanish. It waited patiently, always ready. But there were also new moments. A walk where he noticed the warmth of the sun on his face. A conversation where he listened without planning his reply. A meal that tasted like something, not just something to finish. The change was not visible from the outside. It did not look like success. It did not look like transformation. It looked like attention. And over time, that attention softened something in him. Not erased, not fixed, just softened. He still had questions. He still had restless days. But he no longer felt completely disconnected from his own life. The question from the store never fully left him. It did not need to. Busy with what? Now, sometimes, he had an answer. He was busy noticing. He was busy being where he already was. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. Because a life does not become meaningful when it is filled. It becomes meaningful when it is felt. If this story found a quiet place inside you, let it stay there for a while. Some answers do not need to be rushed.